Let's get into this right now with Chris Kenny, of course, my colleague here at Sky News, the former Deputy Prime Minister, the member for New England, and a very patient viewer of the program in Canberra right now is none other than Barnaby Joyce. Lads, hello. So let's talk about the UN and the UN climate meeting right now that couldn't be going harder in the wrong direction here. Barnaby, the idea, as we talked about last night, of climate reparations is basically the latest dress-up for the left's dream for the past 40 years, which is rich developed countries pay for everyone else, including developing countries like China.
We start to see this for what it is. It's socialism. It's a redistribution of wealth. And from a country that's already under the pump with incredibly high power prices, incredibly high petrol prices, incredibly high grocery prices, where people are really doing it tough, where you have to acknowledge that the reason that there's so much of this inflationary aspect is both international and domestic so-called legislated climate change targets. I mean, you wanted them, you voted for them, and now you're paying for them. Every time you pay a power bill, there's a price for righteousness, and the price you're paying on your power bill, your fuel bill, your grocery bill. But now we're going to go to the next step where you're actually going to hand over your whole money, I don't know, to Central African republics or something like that, because that is also apparently righteous, also crazy. And I don't think that's going to change the temperature of the globe. It'll certainly make your wallet a lot colder. You're going to have a lot more spare space in that wallet because you'll have a lot less money because in this righteous charge to do all the things the kiddies tell you to do, you're always the bunny in the headlights. You're always going to be the one that paid.
Correct. I mean, you know, Chris, we've made this point for 10 years. We've made this conversation for 10 years about the cost of transition will result in higher power prices for people. We heard about that business today with its ridiculous gas bill and the potential about that'll have to be passed on to customers. But I'm sorry, you want to draw a line in the sand. I will gladly draw the line in the sand for everyone, which is I'm not paying climate reparations to China. They've got a space station and they've held 2 Olympic Games, yet they're still a developing country.
Mate, you're right. We've been talking about this for 10 years. This has been happening in slow motion, yet still they double down on this. I am beyond being able to comprehend what our politicians and what our media and what so many of our academics and the like are doing here. This is beyond batshit crazy. That's what this is. Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, who's the former socialist prime minister of Portugal, is out there spruiking his socialist message and an extremely catastrophic, alarmist, insane message about the whole world being on a highway to hell with its foot on the accelerator. This is not the language and of global diplomacy, of sensible management. And instead of countering it with facts and arguments and rational analysis, the Labor government here, Chris Bowen and others, climb on board with this rhetoric. And they even say that we should adopt this agenda of talking about reparations to other countries. And meanwhile, energy prices are going through the roof in Australia. Families and businesses are really suffering, and we know this won't change the climate. We know global emissions are still going up. The critical thing here, Paul, I mean, it just does your head in, right? Chris Bowen is telling people that floods and fires and droughts and all the rest of it will be worse if you don't go with Labor's plan. And they go along with this whole catastrophe unfolding. It's a terrible, terrible future we're looking at. But at the same time, they're saying they've got to keep doing what we've been doing so far, and it's going to deliver this nirvana of economic prosperity and green jobs. I mean, it is actually insane, yet we have most of the media and about 2/3 of our politicians just afraid to actually call it out and inject some facts into the debate.
Well, and it's this thing as well, Barnaby, where, you know, we talked about this, you know, for a big chunk of this year, and then the election went the way that it did, was that the Greens would end up being in control of the many of the policies of the federal government. First we see, of course, let's review all of the licences that apparently we're absolutely going to back in. And now, surprise, surprise, they're going after the very dams that, you know, anyone who has ever voted National in their life knows we need more of, because we might need to store some money if we're going to have more people around the joint.
Well, look, isn't it perverse? You see the floods, all that water, it's just flying out to sea, going through people's houses. We could be storing that water and maybe just taking a centimetre, an inch off the top, mitigating some of that flood effect, and storing the wealth for later on. But of course, that's against the great god Gaia. You know, the great climate god says, "Thou shalt not build dams. Dams are evil. And then they come up and they'll say it's the fish, it's the tortoise, it's the frogs, it's a worm, whatever it is. But the main thing is it's socialism. It's socialism. They just don't like development. And you take in my area, Dungowan Dam, they've kicked that into the long grass. So what does the city do, one of the fastest growing regional cities in Australia do? Do we just go to rolling water restrictions? What about the thousands, I'm talking thousands and thousands of jobs that will move to the city in the meat processing sector, poultry processing sector, which are held up because we don't have water security? What do we say to the people who say, I want to be like in Sydney where I can water my lawn without rolling water restrictions every time it gets drier? We say, well, no, you're in the country area. Come on, you're a bumpkin. You don't deserve that sort of standard of living. You're a silly person. Live out in the country.
Yeah.
You know, this is the sort of outrage that we have, and we really need an epiphany amongst the Australian people. If you want to chain yourself to climate change targets, the great god Gaia, not building dams, fighting against the things that actually earn you the money, the coal, the gas that actually earns you money, and saying they're evil, you're going to be poor. You're going to experience what it's like. You'll actually, if you're really successful,
Barnaby,
you'll actually have
need a clear
have them
alternative.
sending you money as a developing country.
Get in there, Chris.
Yeah, Barnaby, I mean, you're right. There needs to be an epiphany of the Australian people, but to do that, they need to have a clear political choice, don't they, Paul? I mean, the point is that the coalition can't give people that choice at the moment because the coalition is dictated to by these moderates who, Simon Birmingham and the likes, they're as far down this sort of green left road as Matt Keane and the rest of them. The public of the whole country need to have a clear choice, a party that understands the very foundation of our prosperity and our success has been and always will be cheap, reliable energy.